What's good, y'all? What's good, Real Talk Squad? This is Miles. Listen to Real Talk with Miles Johnson, where I always keep it real. Now, I've got a special guest, a special guest returning for the show, my man Marcus. What's up, bro? How you doing?
What's up, bro? It's been a minute since I've been on the show, so I appreciate you for having me on and giving me a call. Sending me a message, but it's always a pleasure to talk hoops with you. I know it's going to be a good show, and I know we've got some good stuff to talk about. So I just can't wait.
Definitely. Now, shout us out. Shout out your podcast. Tell the folks listening right now, where they can find you.
Oh yeah, go talk with Marcus. Twitter, Instagram, TikTok, YouTube, Apple Podcasts, iHeartRadio, Spotify, and GTP Marcus on everything. Um, I've been doing football episode for all 32 teams, or up to 14. Um, it's been crazy. So please make sure y'all check that out. Miles has been on there, so if you only want to watch those episodes with him, you can do that. That's fine.
Yes, sir.
But
Yes,
yeah, man, I
sir.
appreciate it.
For sure. Now him, my man Steezy, Justin, Peyton, y'all been locking in, has some great content. So I'll have all that in the description down below. Be sure to check that out. So as y'all know, y'all see by the title, this is a hoops episode, NBA basketball episode. My man Marcus coming here on talk some hoops, and we'll get straight into it right now. Now we haven't talked since the finals,
Right.
since the Warriors beat the Celtics in six games. Now I was on record saying that the Celtics would win in 6 games, and I was wrong. But what were your thoughts on the Warriors, on Steph winning Finals MVP? What was your thoughts on them, winning that chip?
I picked the Warriors to win the chip in August.
Woo!
I was convinced, and I know we were just coming off of the Bucks winning the chip and the Suns having a really good season, but like I feel like a lot of times with injuries, especially with long-term injuries, we kind of forget just how good a team or how good a player is. And that was, I think, the case with the Warriors. So as we saw the ascension of Giannis, and we kind of saw that maybe the Suns are kind of going to be good and like championship good for the first time in their franchise's history. But I think it was like, well, wait a minute, we still got these dudes named Steph and Clay and Draymond that were dominating the league for the better part of our, not for the better part, but for the better part of recent memory up
Yep.
until Klay Thompson gets hurt. I thought that Steph and the Warriors were going to win the chip last season when Klay was going to come back, but then he tore his Achilles on top of already having torn his ACL. So this is a hungry team that wanted a lot to prove. They did a lot of like you want a masterclass on developing young talent. Literally just watch the Warriors as they've progressed over the last, what is it now, 13 seasons with Steph Curry, because they have put a masterclass on of developing young talent. They draft they draft Poole, they draft Moses Moody and Jonathan Kuminga last season. They bring in Andrew Wiggins in a trade that I will admit I was against at first, because I was really excited to potentially see Steph, Clay, Dre, and D'Lo together. I thought that would have been pretty much what we got with Steph, Clay, Dre, and Jordan Poole, but just a little bit better, because I think D'Angelo Russell at his best is better than Jordan Poole, of course. But
Yeah.
Andrew Wiggins was consistently the best player on this team offensively and defensively, as far as like he's the only guy you could rely on to be really good offensively and really good defensively. And that is an underrated quality, and I hope he gets paid. I am on record as saying that the only reason why Wiggins was an all-star this season was because there was no Klay Thompson. And while I do still believe that, I do also think, and I was never an Andrew Wiggins hater, but I do think that Andrew Wiggins silenced a lot of his hater, because, we were talking about, a lot of people were saying, oh, Andrew Wiggins is the biggest bust since Anthony Bennett or whatever, for does not seem like he wasn't, but he came out, he thrived in his role, and now he's a champion. For Steph, we're talking 4 championships in 8 years, which is insane to think of.
Mm.
This is a Warriors team that is now the 4th team in history to do that. We got to go back to obviously the Bulls with MJ. We got to go back to the Showtime Lakers, and we got to go back all the way back to Bill Russell and his Celtics way back in the day. Those are only 4 teams to go to at least 8 finals and win 4 of them, or go to the finals. I think it's 6 times and win 4 of them, or something along that. Either way, it's insane to think of. It's a really good football or really good basketball team. Yeah, I mean, it's the Warriors. And I'm not going to jump the gun just yet. I want to wait until see free agency, but as always, I make my pick in August once everything's wrapped up.
Yeah.
It's looking right now like the Warriors are going to go back and win it again. It
I'm with
really,
you.
it really is. I know there's rumors about there's interest, there's rumored interest with KD coming back, and Steph and Clay and Dre have all been informed of that. And I know how you feel about that, obviously. But if that happens, even if that doesn't happen, we're talking about a team of the Golden State Warriors that has so much depth now. I think this is the deepest the Warriors have ever been in the Stephen Curry era.
Facts.
We're
Facts.
talking about a team in the Phoenix Suns who's taken a step back a little bit. I think they're going to lose DeAndre Ayton. This is a conference that has two good bigs, Nikola Jokic and Anthony Davis has a health problem. So we're talking about a situation where
What
the
about
only
Cat?
what am I worried about, Cat? We're talking
Oh
about a
my God, we're
situation.
gonna get that a
We're
little
talking
later.
about, well, we'll get into it. We'll get into it. We're talking about a situation where a conference with really one good bona fide big in Nikola Jokic, and this is a team that has thrived on small ball from its inception. Really, of course, I think the Golden State Warriors could make it through the Western Conference again and be back in the the NBA Finals for what would be the fifth time in 9 years. But more importantly, it'd be the fifth time in 7 playoff appearances that they've made the finals, which is even crazier to think of.
No, facts, facts. I mean, I've been a Warriors hater since I was maybe like a sophomore in high school, even like a freshman in high school when they first won in 2015. And ever since then, as a big Brown fan, I was like, these light skinned brothers, Steph, Clay. I'm tired of these guys. Draymond always talking trash. I'm tired of these guys. I'm here to say now they have that's like this chip validated their dynasty, because it was all this talk about the first ring. Kyrie was out, Kevin Love was out.
Yep.
I never gave him that respect. And then 2016, they blew a 3-1 lead. Come 2017, 2018, they got KD, the second best player in the world at the time.
Yep.
I mean, you're supposed to win.
Yep.
So this was like the first time where it was like, okay, I had y'all was down 2-1 at a certain point. A lot of people were picking the Celtics. Heck, I even saw on ESPN BPI, it was like the Celtics were like a 75 plus percent favorite over the Warriors. This was like when they were down 3-2 at this point too. So people were still down the Warriors and they rose on top. And so I gotta give them that credit. And that chip proves that they can win, right? They can win despite the injuries. Injuries are all part of sports. But the Celtics, Tatum was playing, Jaylen Brown was playing, Marcus Smart was playing. There was no injuries. You can't say no excuses. They won fair and square. Gotta give them that respect. Speaking of Andrew Wiggins, the defense he played on Jason Tatum was phenomenal. I mean, like,
Absolutely.
the fact that he essentially shut him down. Now, I will say that Tatum is that good of a player that he shouldn't be just scoring 2 points in the second half of a game 6.
100%.
Your Andrew Wiggins is a good defender, but he's not. You can still get more than 2 points. So I think the job Wiggins did, not only on the offensive end, being basically their second best player consistently throughout the finals, but on the defensive end, is a big reason why they won that championship. And it's talking about Steph Curry. That game 4, that was iconic. I had a video. I was like, that's his game. That's the
Oh,
Steph Curry
100%.
game.
Yeah.
Game 4. I
Yeah.
mean, they were on the verge of being down 3-1. You're not coming back from 3-1. I don't care nobody. So you're not
Yeah.
nobody's Brian. You're not doing that again.
Yeah.
So the fact that he was able to put up that 40 piece when nobody could buy a bucket, that was that Steph Curry game. And when 10 years down the line, 20 years down the line, people are going to look back at that game and be like, oh, yeah, that's when Steph Curry proved that he can get it done in the finals. And
Yeah.
we're talking about Steph Curry. Is he top 10? I've been on record saying that he is top 10, and I will go to bat saying that he's top 10. But I want to hear your opinion. I had something on Instagram. I was like, he's top 10 undebatably. You said, oh, it's a debate.
It is. I think it is. I think it is a debate. Listen, and I want to start by saying this is not. There are some debates that are undeniable, right? Like there are some debates that are non-negotiable. It doesn't mean like to even have the debate. You might as well be like, it is undeniable that no matter what order you have them in, it is undeniable that Jordan, Kareem, and LeBron are the three greatest players of all time. That's undeniable. That is a fact. You can't name a guy better than any of those three guys at the game of basketball ever. Like, that's a fact, right? It is undeniable that Tom Brady is the greatest quarterback of all time. That's a fact. You can't deny that. I can go on about Michael Phelps in swimming and Serena Williams as a tennis player and Tiger Woods as a golfer. All of those things are undeniable. Here is my one pushback on Steph Curry being top 10. And real quick, I'll list you my top 10. It's for me, it's
Let me hear
LeBron,
it.
Jordan, Kareem, Magic. Um, it's been a minute. I'll just do it in no particular order. I've got
No big order.
LeBron, Jordan, Kareem, Magic, Shaq's up there, Kobe's up there. I've got Wilt in my top 10. Kobe, obviously, Bird, Duncan, and Olajuwon. That's my top 10.
Okay.
Curry's 11. There's two reasons why Curry's 11. And one of them is more important to me than the other. I know a lot of people say, oh, well, everyone in their consensus top 10 has at least 2 finals MVPs. I don't really harp on that much. I do think that that's a valid point that you can make. That is a point that you can make if you want to compare accolades. But this is what I say, and this is, I think, something that will be, I think, because of how great Steph is, I do think it will be ignored the way we've ignored it with Magic and Bird, and that's this. There's two sides of the basketball. And all 10 guys in my top 10 undeniably are better defenders than Steph Curry ever. Steph Curry's not a bad defender, but he's not as good as a defender of Jordan or as Kobe or as any of these other guys, right? Now you talk about people say, oh, well, what about Magic and Bird? Okay, well, Bird led the league in steals 3 times, I believe. I might have it mixed up. I did comment on it on a post. I'm sorry, Magic led the league in steals 3 times, and Bird has three all defensive teams, first teams to his name. Right. But Bird is also the first and only ever 3-time MVP. And Magic and Bird are kind of like together. Whether people always argue about what the greatest era of basketball is, and we do this all the time. We hear old guys and new guys do all the time. But, and this is a fact, you can look it up. The 1980s has already been dubbed as the golden age of basketball. The two faces of the 1980s were Magic Johnson and Larry Bird. Those guys dominated the 80s in a way that I don't think you can say there's any other duo that dominated a decade the way that Magic and Bird did, as far as finals appearances, as far as single player accolades, team accomplishments, all of that. So as not, while you can make the argument that they weren't stout defenders, they were elite offensively. Like, Larry Bird was a splendid 3-point shooter. He was a splendid shooter all around. He was a really, really, really good
He was a
basketball player,
bad man.
right? We've
Bad
seen
man.
white dudes play ball, but like, Larry Bird is the greatest white dude to ever step foot on an NBA basketball court. He's just that good. Magic is the greatest point guard of all time. He is the only listed point guard anyway that could play the 1, the 2, the 3, the 4, and the 5. How do I know this? Because he closed out an NBA Finals playing the center as a point guard. He did that. So for me, the only guy I look at and I say you could put Curry in instead of him would be Hakeem. And that's because there's a strong argument that can be made that Hakeem doesn't have his 2 chips if Jordan doesn't retire the first time. That's a fair argument to make, right? But the what if game is a very dangerous game, because we can take it a step further and say if Ray Allen never hits that corner 3, then Jordan's not the only guy that's 6-0 in the finals. Duncan is too, right?
Yeah.
We can keep going. You mentioned earlier with the what if game. Well, if Kyrie and K-Love aren't hurt in 2015, the Warriors don't win that first chip, right? There's so many what ifs. So I don't like to play what ifs. I'll say this one last thing, right? Steph Curry has absolutely revolutionized the game of basketball. And I see a lot of people say that is the reason why he's top 10. To me, those are 2 different discussions, right? There is a top 10 guys that revolutionized the game of basketball. Those are still, your LeBrons, your Kobe's, Curry's obviously on that list, Jordan's on that list, Allen Iverson's on that list. But then there's the 10 best people to have ever stepped foot on an NBA basketball court. And right now, for me, Steph Curry is 11. I do think, though, that because of how prolific he is offensively, there will come a point in time down the line where it will become undisputed, because he's just that good offensively, where it won't matter that he hasn't been selected to any defensive teams. It won't matter that he hasn't really been that prolific defender. But right now, because I can name 10 guys defensively that are better than Steph, and those same 10 guys are in the same and this might sound crazy, but if you really think about it, those same 10 guys are in the same stratosphere or close to offensively. I have to give those 10 guys the nod, right? Like,
Woo.
and so that's what it is for me. But I'm not one of
Mhm.
those guys that'll sit up here and tell you, oh, you're wrong if you have Steph top 10, because he's got the argument, right? No one's gonna hit more threes than him, right? You know what I mean? He's the only unanimous MVP in the history of the in the NBA, right? He's done a lot of things that no one's ever done, right? And so he has. It's not that it's an open and shut, like, no, he's not. But a lot, the same way that people say with the same way that Jordan fans say with LeBron that the cement is still wet, it's not dry, and there's still a chance that guys that don't think LeBron is the GOAT could be the GOAT. I think that same way about Steph. Steph's cement's not dry yet, right? We're going to see Steph around in his prime, I would say, for at least another 5 years. And we'll still see Steph
Mhm.
play basketball for at least another 7, right? At the minimum, he'll be playing for at least another 7 years because he's a shooter. He might play longer than that.
Yeah.
There's still time for him to get in there. But right now, I don't know, as great as he is offensively, I just feel like it hasn't gotten to that point where you can completely ignore the defensive liability, for lack of a better word, that Stephen Curry is. That's my only knock. I'm not
Mhm.
going to do the accolades thing because he's got 4 chips, right? And if you go down the list of NBA champions, there aren't many guys in the history of the league that has more than 4 chips. Uh we're talking
MJ,
We're talking MJ,
Kareem,
we're talking Kareem, we're talking
Magic,
Kobe, we're talking Magic, we're talking Duncan. Those are the only
and
guys off the
Russell.
top of
And
my
Russell.
head,
That's
right?
it.
And Bill Russell, that have more chips than Curry. So I'm not gonna do the achievements thing because I'd be crazy if I said his achievements aren't enough. I'm gonna say that because there's a whole other side of the basketball that Steph's not great at, that's why he's not top 10. But he'll get there. He'll get there for sure.
I got you. See, where I look at it, it's the fact that he is the greatest shooter of all time. And we
Yeah,
talk about who's the greatest. Oh, Michael Jordan. He is one of the greatest, probably the greatest, like layup pack. No matter if I probably say, like, Iverson or Kyrie, they got the best layup package. But you talk about a
sure.
guy that can just like fly up in the air, dunk it, do all these
Yeah,
acrobatics. Jordan is that top guy. Talk about the greatest passer ever. Magic. Talk about greatest IQ. LeBron.
yeah,
It's like the greatest for like each
yeah,
thing.
yeah,
Everybody on the top 10 really has that. Talk
yeah.
about the most dominant player of all time. That's Shaq. He's got to
Mhm.
be in the top 10.
Of
The
course.
greatest winner, Bill Russell, got to be in the top 10, or he's in most top 10s. With Curry, that greatest shooter of all time argument is huge for me.
Of
And
course.
I think in terms of the offense, his offense doesn't just his offense isn't just elite for himself. Steph Curry's offense is so elite that he literally frees up space for Klay Thompson. Klay Thompson
Mhm.
is not a Hall of Famer without Steph Curry. Draymond Green is not a Hall of Famer without Steph Curry. I can make an argument that those two got that Steph Curry would still be a Hall of Famer without Klay or Draymond. I think that in the day, what Curry has done for his teammates also puts him over the top that I don't
Of
see
course.
other guys in the top 10 or around that top 12, area. Not everybody has that. Kobe was amazing, right? That he had the same effect on his teammates the way that Curry has. It's two different leaders, but the way that Curry enhances his teammates as well. It's not in the assist. You're not going to see it in the assist all the time, but in terms of freeing up space, in this championship, I think showed it's gonna be a hot take that Steph, regardless that KD was on those Warriors teams and they won 2 chips, he was the Finals and MVP both times. That Steph was still the best player on that team, and I say that because KD literally could ISO anybody and not be double teamed because the other team is worried about Steph Curry putting up 20 points in a quarter. They're worried about the threat that he has offensively. So when you talk about the greatest shooter of all time, when you talk about what he's done to enhance his teammates' careers, we don't even think of Kevin Durant like the same way we do now. Yes, I've been on him about you know him going to Golden State. I'll forever be on him for that. But you can't take away his finals MVPs. but he joined Steph Curry for that. That's got to be something that I think enhances Curry's legacy, especially after KD, and we're going to talk about him later on, hasn't gotten it done, since he's left Steph Curry. And just talk about the offensive, him on offense. I feel like it's so great that he's not I don't think he's all right. He's not no all world, defensive guard for sure. I'm not going to say that. But I do think that his defense is a little bit underrated, and especially since 2019. Talk about Draymond Green talked about it, how he's been locking it in the gym, and I think this is after he lost that finals, and and that motivated him against Toronto. That motivated him to be like, let me get in the gym. And since then, he hasn't been. I haven't seen Steph Curry get bullied the way that he used to
No,
get
of
bullied
course
in the
not. No, of
past,
course not. Yeah.
right? So you talk about, his defense isn't no world class. He's not no he's not the glove or Marcus Smart, nothing like that. But I do think that his defense is a B plus on some nights, right? So his defense isn't that far off, but his offense and being the greatest weapon in this game right now, the greatest weapon probably in the past 8 years, since he's really come to dominance in the NBA. You got to put him up there. But I know I like your point that his story isn't written right now. He has a bunch of years left. I think that Steph will play till he's 43. I mean, worst case scenario, he can be a
Sure.
spot up shooter. He can be a JJ Redick. He can be a Ray Allen, right? So, where's the worst case scenario? He plays till 40 some, man. The records that he's gonna break as well. He could end up get into that top eight.
I think another
He
thing
can get
that's
he can get into that maybe tops. He can get into that upper echelon of like that Kobe, that Bird, that like top eight, top seven area, especially with the records that he's gonna every time he shoots a three, that's another record, like every single time. And that's record that's never gonna be broken. But that's a valid point. I think that as at his peak, this past 8 years, this past 6 7 years, I don't think there isn't 10 guys that I see that have a better peak than Steph Curry. But now I like what you said that his story is not written. Now I want to get into his ex teammate Kevin Durant. Been on record, been going at him. I've been telling him he doesn't like adversity. He runs when it gets hard. I was pretty disgusted to see him request a trade from the Nets. Now, do you think the Nets are the best destination for him, or should he go to Miami, a Phoenix, or what do you think is the best place for Kevin Durant?
the Nets aren't the best place for Kevin Durant, but it's not for the reasons that one would think. It's actually quite simple. And Kevin Durant is superb. Kevin Durant has proven, and it's a point of contention. I don't think anyone in the world will ever agree on it, or I don't think everyone in the world will ever agree on this. But I think that Kevin Durant has proven that he can be the best player on a championship team. The issue is, I feel like because of the way that Kevin's career has gone, I think sometimes we've over exaggerated what's happened up to this point, right? When KD and Harden and Russ were still in OKC, they made it to the finals. Like that is a team that had championship potential. When you talk about some of the greatest combinations of talent to never win a championship, that is one of the first combinations of time that comes up. And I think what happened in OKC was they gave up on that too soon. Now, I don't know if that's because they knew that Harden would maybe they knew that Harden would get really good, and so they wouldn't be able to hold all three of those contracts, or what. But that blew up, in my opinion, too quick. Because I think if you keep those three together for a little
Oh,
bit longer,
facts. They
they
win the
win a
chip.
championship.
Heck yeah.
That's number one. Number two, so KD leaves the Thunder and goes to Golden State, and that has been dubbed as the weakest move in the history of basketball. You could make that argument, but let me just offer this as food for thought. Right? We all have acknowledged that KD could only go as far as he did with the Thunder now, because at that point there is no longer any James Harden. Right? When they blew the 3-1 lead, James Harden's gone. It's just Russ and KD. That pairing had already run its course. It wasn't going to get any further. So what should KD have done? Stay and then we slander KD for not being as great as he should have been? No, he leaves. Do I agree that going to the team that came back down 3-1 against you was the smartest thing to do? No, I don't subscribe to the if you can't beat them, join them philosophy, but I'm not going to hate on Kevin Durant for having left OKC. Right now, he goes to Golden State, wins the 2 championships. Would have been 3 if he and or Klay Thompson doesn't get hurt. But again, we're not going to play the what if game. What I will say though is this: what did everybody say about Kevin Durant the second he won his first championship? Oh well, it's not going to mean anything if he can go somewhere else and win another one. So KD's hearing this. He is the most active superstar on social media as far as engaging with the fans as anybody. Like we know we see LeBron on there, but LeBron's always promoting the brand and stuff. Kevin Durant,
KD's sensitive.
Claps back. He's sensitive, sure, right? So all everyone said about KD was, if you can't win a championship elsewhere, then these championship here in Golden State means nothing. Well, what is a man of KD's caliber that knows who he is and knows how great he is going to do? He's going to leave. That's what happened. So I do think that the fans and the media bullied Kevin Durant out of Golden State. And this is where I start to disagree with the masses. Because here's number one. Number one, I think we've forgotten just who Kevin Durant is. I think we've forgotten that before Kevin Durant went to Golden State, he was a former MVP and he was a scoring champion and was on the verge of becoming, if not already, the best player in the world. And I think he was on the verge of becoming that, right? I think in 17 and 18, he was the best player in the world. But going to Brooklyn, we look at his 3 years in Brooklyn. And I saw your show with Joel of Pick a Side, and I love Pick a Side, and I love Joel, and I'm trying to get Joel on my podcast. But, and I wish he was here because I would tell him this. I don't really like
have a trio.
I don't like talking about people's takes without them being in my face so I can talk to them about it. But it's fine.
Hey, Joel, come on, man.
I just wanted to bring it up again. Joel said that Luka Doncic has accomplished more in the last 3 years than Kevin Durant does, and that's why he's in his top 5. That's a fact. But I think again that sometimes, and I'm not saying that Joel does this. I'm just using that as an example, as a thing that someone will say. And Joel's a smart man. I know he does. He's not one of these people. But I think we've forgotten just what's happened over the last 3 years in Kevin Durant's career. He missed all of his first season in Brooklyn. Why? Because of his Achilles injury. He comes back in his second season, plays phenomenal basketball, was an MVP candidate in that season, takes his team to the playoffs. But what happened? James Harden was a shell of himself, and Kyrie Irving was hurt. So he gets bounced out. Then what happens this season? James Harden forces his way out. Kyrie Irving doesn't play basketball until like the last 10 games of the season, and they get swept by the Boston Celtics. Should a player of Kevin Durant's caliber ever be swept in the first round? No. And I'm not going to give KD a pass on that. But what I will say is the same day we sat and we talked about how if Kyrie Irving played more games of basketball, the Nets would have never been in that situation. That is the same way we need to look at it from that lens and say, hey, let's talk about just how great Kevin Durant has been over the last 2.5 seasons, really, because he did miss half of this season roughly and all of his first season in Brooklyn. I say all that to say this. I think Kevin Durant is still a phenomenal talent. And I think that because we as fans and members of the media, I think we've been spoiled. I think LeBron James, not to sound corny, I don't actually believe this, but there's an argument to be made that LeBron James has ruined basketball. Because LeBron made it look easy. LeBron went to what, 10 straight finals? Or something like that? He went to 8 straight in the East, went to 10 straight overall, won 4 of them, something along those lines. Like LeBron James made winning championships look easy. Michael Jordan made winning championships look easy because every time he went, he did it. Steph Curry, to a degree, has made championships look easy. And I think what we've forgotten is that even if you are the best of the best, the upper echelon of your craft, it still takes a lot to win a championship. Tom Brady has made championships look easy. Like we have grown up in a world, we're talking about Tiger Woods and Serena Williams and Brady and all these great champions that have won multiple champions and have been elite and at the top of their craft for an extended period of time. And we have let that blind us on what it takes to actually win a championship. Allen Iverson is Allen Iverson is the pound for pound GOAT. There is no one in the history of basketball at Allen Iverson's height or weight that played better basketball than him. Allen
Preach.
Iverson, as great as he was, is so great that we had to give him one game against the Los Angeles Lakers in 2001 because that's how good he was, but his team wasn't. Again, there are so many great players that win so many championships in a short period of time that it made us think that winning a championship is easy. So I love Kevin Durant. I think Kevin Durant's the best in the world. I felt that way from the moment that he won the second championship, right? I've always felt that way from the moment he won the second championship. But again, I think that we've been spoiled and we think that championships to win them are easy. A lot's got to go right. And a lot of luck gets played in. Like we talk about the Suns last season, their whole run to the final. We say, oh, well, if AD was healthy, they wouldn't have made that first round. That's luck. It's not the Suns' fault, but that's luck. I think you have to have a lot of good breaks, but there's a lot of things that just have to go your way in order for you to get to a position to win a championship and then ultimately win it. I do think that Kevin Durant has been kind of disrespected a little bit. I'm not going to disagree with you. Going back to Golden State would be the worst thing Kevin Durant can do.
Oh
He
my.
better go anywhere but Golden
too.
State. That can't happen. But if you're just looking at the trajectory of Kevin Durant's career and just who he is and what he was doing and how great he is at this game we call basketball, given all that he could do in the situation that he was doing, I think that because of all the great champions that we've been exposed to in our lifetimes, that has caused us to be harder on really, really, really good to great players that haven't won as many. Right? We do it with Aaron Rodgers. We do it with James Harden. We've done it with KD. We do it with so many great players at their craft because of how great they are. And we expect them to just automatically rattle off 3 to 4 championships. And it's not that easy. And until we as fans and until members of the media kind of realize that and accept that to be truth, I don't think Kevin Durant's ever going to get truly his flowers until he's gone and we get career retrospectives. But like, if you want to hate on KD, I'm not going to get mad at you. You know, we're all entitled to our opinions, but I like to look at the big picture from start to bottom or from top to bottom. And from top to bottom, the fact of the matter is there aren't that many players in the NBA today that are better than Kevin Durant. And despite all that he's gone through and the failure that is the Brooklyn Nets, he's still a top 5 player in the league, I think. And lastly, but most importantly, the Brooklyn Nets failing. I'm going to get so much heat from this. I don't care. The Brooklyn Nets failing is not Kevin Durant's fault. Kevin Durant was on his way to the Knicks when he left Golden State. Kevin Durant is in Brooklyn because of Kyrie Irving. So if we're going to put some blame on this, if someone's to blame for what is arguably the biggest failure in the history of basketball, it should be Kyrie Irving because Kyrie wanted to team up with KD in Brooklyn because Kyrie wanted to form his own culture in Brooklyn. They still wanted to play together, but Kyrie wanted to do his own thing in Brooklyn and kind of get that. He didn't want to join the Knicks culture and be a Knick. He wanted to be a Net and create his own culture around the Brooklyn Nets. And there's no shot at Kyrie for doing that. But if that's your goal, Kyrie should be the guy that we're not bashing because he shouldn't be bashed, but we should be blaming for this failure because if there is no Kyrie, KD's a New York Knick and would probably still be a New York Knick, I think. And he probably wouldn't have asked, well, maybe he would have because the Knicks suck. But he would be by himself. He would have had his own team. I think KD, because of his friendship for Kyrie, is in Brooklyn because he is friends with Kyrie. He's wanted to ball with Kyrie. He wants to play with his friend, right? And you know, our mothers always tell us, right? If your friends tell you to jump off a cliff, are you going to jump off a cliff? You shouldn't. And I think in this instance, Kevin Durant jumped off a cliff with his friend, and that has now resulted in a lot of people trying to tarnish his legacy. But again, if we're going to talk about who's to blame for this failure in Brooklyn, it should be Kyrie because KD was on his way to the other team in New York. He was on his way to the Knicks. And if it wasn't for Kyrie Irving, Kevin Durant would have been a Knick, not a Net.
No, that's facts. Look, if you talk about blame, percentage of blame, I believe 75% of the blame goes to Kyrie Irving.
Sure.
I'm gonna have 20 of it go to KD because in terms of he wasn't that leader. If again,
sure,
the best player of the team doesn't necessarily have to be the leader.
Yeah.
But in KD's case, He wasn't a leader. It's not like Kyrie. Kyrie thinks he thinks he's a leader and he's not.
Mhm.
At least on the basketball court. Now outside of basketball, he has a lot of good stuff with the community, all that. But on the basketball court, Kyrie has shown he is not a leader. So it was Katie's job to be that leader for the Nets. He was not. That's why I give him 20% of the blame, and 5% of it goes to Steve Nash.
Sure.
That he is a terrible coach. Ever since he been in Brooklyn, he would play
Sure.
Katie 48, 46 minutes in the playoffs, burn him out. I'm like, is that your only game plan? So I'll
Yeah.
give you, it's not just Kevin Durant's fault. But like you said, Katie's first year out for the entire year.
Mhm.
Katie's second year was a couple inches away from beating the eventual champions, the
And
Bucks.
that year, everybody had the Brooklyn Nets going to the finals
Yeah, no, that's
as a
true.
healthy team.
Yeah,
So I think again, like that's a part that we have to recognize.
no, facts. And so they almost beat the Bucks
Mhm.
last year, and then come this year, Kyrie. Again, this is his views, but he sabotaged the season. This is no way around it. He sabotaged the season. But because of those points, that's why myself and a lot of people are so disgusted by Kevin Durant wanting a trade, is because you
Sure.
never gave the Nets a real shot. So it's
I
like you
think
just run it back with Kyrie Irving. You got Ben Simmons, you got Steph Curry, you got Joe Harris, you got Nick Claxton, you'll sign back. You got Patty Mills, who is a seasoned vet, who's won multiple championships, or he's won that chip with the Spurs. You got a very good team. If you're if you're a top five player, if you're, a lot of people think that he's top three as well. If you're really that guy, then that's a championship roster. And you should be able
of
to win a
course.
championship
Yeah.
if everybody, stays together, no injuries, nothing like
Mhm.
that. Stays
Mhm.
together, got that chemistry.
Yeah.
You should just run it back. So that's where a lot of the blame goes with Kevin Durant on my side, because it's like, bro, you didn't even give him a chance. And talking about you do what your friends do. If your friend gonna fall off a cliff, you gonna fall off a cliff too. I feel like because Kyrie wanted out, KD is like, heck, I want out too. He's not really,
I
he's not, he's
think
not, he's not. Yeah, go on.
I feel I'll be honest with you. I think KD was always going to ask for a trade. I think KD made up in his mind during the season he was going to ask out, and
Mm,
I really do. And I think Kyrie Irving opted in to his contract. That doesn't mean Kyrie Irving's not leaving. It simply means Kyrie Irving. It is much easier for if the Nets want to trade Kyrie Irving.
yeah,
It's much easier to just find a trade partner than find a sign and trade partner. Because when you're signing and trading, the salaries have to match, like with not much wiggle room. If you're just going to trade, number one, you can get more back for it. But number two, more importantly, there's a little bit of wiggle room with your salary. That's something not a lot of people know. Like the salary cap gymnastics with a signing trade are a lot more restricted than with a regular trade. I think KD had already made up in his mind during the season he wanted to trade. And I think the reason why is because Kyrie Irving is only committed to Kyrie Irving. I'm not going to slander Kyrie Irving for that because he's a grown man, and if he wants to only be committed to himself, he should be able to do that. I think Kevin Durant has recognized that while the roster, when healthy and when everyone is fully available, is a championship roster, the big question mark isn't health. The big question mark is availability. Because if you're looking at Kevin Durant, he's coming off an Achilles injury. He's coming off of some knee issues last season and some hamstring issues this season. Kevin Durant has been dealing with a lot of injuries the last couple of seasons. We have not seen Kevin Durant play a full season, a full healthy season of basketball. So
it's
we're
like
talking
2018 maybe.
right. And when I say healthy season, I don't mean all 82. That's insane. We don't get all 82 nowadays. When I say healthy, I'm talking about at least 65 games. Off the top of my head, Kevin Durant hasn't played at least 65 games
Since Golden State.
since Golden State. So when I'm thinking about all of that, what I'm saying is, if I'm Kevin Durant, I would have asked for a trade too. It doesn't look good to ask for a trade out of the Brooklyn Nets, but Kevin Durant wants to go somewhere where he can compete for a championship. And when your guy, your number two guy, who is the reason why you're there, has made conscious decisions to put other things over basketball, this is a guy in Kevin Durant who doesn't have a girlfriend. He's not married. He has no kids. Like KD
He
is
just
all about
hoops.
Hooper. He is the quintessential hooper. He gets up every day for the love of basketball and for the wanting to win a championship. And while the roster on in Brooklyn, when fully healthy and available, is a championship roster, Kyrie Irving has made it clear that there are things outside of basketball that he does prioritize. And that's Kyrie's business. And I'm not going to slander him for that because that's his choice. He's chosen to do that. But because KD has recognized that, me personally, I don't blame KD for leaving. I do have an issue, though, with, and this is, again, when we're talking about slandering the legacy, I do have an issue with this automatic assumption that because KD wants out, it has to be because Golden State just won a championship. Like, it can't be any other reason than
Nah,
because Golden State has won a championship. Those are
yeah,
the people in this conversation that really, like, bother me on Twitter and when you're talking, because it's like, there are other things that Kevin Durant is worried about. Again, he's a scoring champion. He's an MVP. He is one of the greatest scorers the game has ever seen. He's one of the greatest one-on-one scorers the game has ever seen. I think those two things are undeniable. Kevin Durant, if he retires tomorrow, is a Hall of Famer, but B, and most importantly, is one of the greatest players ever. Top 15, top 20 player ever. Kevin Durant honestly could care less that the Golden State Warriors just won a championship.
oh, I beg to
I
differ.
really don't think
I
it.
beg to
I don't
differ.
think it matters that much to Kevin. It matters something. I would, of course,
Yeah,
it
it's a
matters
factor.
something.
It's a factor
I
for
don't
sure.
think it is the factor, though. Is
No,
what I'm
I
saying.
don't.
I
Yeah, I'll
don't
give you
think
that.
that
I'll
is
give you that.
the reason why Kevin Durant is leaving Brooklyn to go play for whether it's Miami or go play for Phoenix. Like that, there are other things the man is worried about than what Steph, Clay, and Draymond are doing. Like let's give, he might be sensitive, but let's give him some credit. Like there are other things he is worried about in life than what Steph Curry, Clay Thompson, and Draymond Green are doing.
No, facts. I don't think it's the. I don't think him going to Golden State or him, him thinking about what, him thinking about Golden State winning a championship. That's not. I don't believe that's like the major factor in him wanting out. I think it is. I think it is the reason he's like, oh, these guys. I bet it's crossed his mind like, damn, these guys won without me. Like, it's just like as a human feeling, you're like, dang, like it's kind of like, your girl, she got somebody else who's look better than you after y'all was together. Human, just the natural human feelings gonna be like, dang, like, she got somebody better than me. So I feel like he definitely felt that way. But if Kevin Durant truly felt like he could win a championship with the Nets, he would still be there. It wouldn't be.
Mhm.
He's not leaving the Nets just because the Warriors. So I definitely agree with that. But nobody is saying that KD isn't that guy. The reason why people have said the Warriors were so unfair is because KD is that guy. And I think
Mhm.
KD doesn't understand when people are like, dude, you made the NBA unfair. That's because you're that good. You're that good. If you were
Yeah.
Harrison Barnes, if you were Gordon Hayward, if you were like, not even Gordon Hayward, if you were like Otto Porter, like if you were anybody else that was like a good small forward, but nothing crazy, nobody would be talking about you the way they are. It's because you're so great and people expect you to basically be like LeBron James, like you basically alluded to, and we've been spoiled because people have thought, oh, if this guy just goes to another team and builds a super team, they're automatically gonna win a championship. That's what Bron has done every single time, every single place he's gone to. People think, oh, okay, that's like the norm now. So I do think that end of the day, the Nets, talent wise, roster wise, on paper, are the best team he can go to. I feel like he wanted to go to he wants to go to Phoenix or Miami. I just feel like they're gonna gut their rosters so much. It's kind of like when Carmelo went to the Knicks. It was like, it would have been nice if he was a free agent and went to the Knicks, but they didn't trade their whole roster to get you. So I think at the end of the day, if he gets traded to Miami, they're still not better than the Bucks. They're probably like I feel
I
like the
think KD to my,
Celtics. I feel like the
I think
Celtics. What do
I
you think?
think KD to Miami makes Miami a championship contender, a legitimate championship contender.
Legit. So they would have to obviously keep. They would keep Jimmy. But what if they have to trade Bam? Oh, matter of fact, no, they can't trade. Well, it would probably be like a 3-team trade because they would have to. The Miami would have to trade Bam, probably like some third team because you can't have two rookie max contracts with Ben Simmons and Bam on the same team.
Yeah,
So I do think that if KD comes to Miami, it's no way in hell that Bam stays there.
that's fine.
So do you think?
You're sacrificing defense, but you have now Jimmy Butler going back to what he loves to do, which is be a facilitator. Jimmy
Mhm.
Butler, just because Jimmy Butler can drop 30 a night, doesn't mean Jimmy Butler is best at dropping 30 a night. That's not what Jimmy Butler is for. And and
No,
and again, just because he can do it doesn't mean he should be doing it. Jimmy Butler, when you look back and when he was on your Sixers, what was Jimmy Butler doing? Jimmy Butler was the primary ball
he was
handler. He was
facilitating,
facilitating everything around him.
and
And
then
the
once it
only
came to crunch
time
time,
Jimmy Butler was really scoring was in crunch time or when Ben Simmons was on the floor, who is another primary ball handler. Why? Because Jimmy Butler's a better scorer, obviously, than Ben Simmons. What Miami lacks right now is a solid number two and a reliable number three. They thought Kyle Lowry was going to be that guy. He's not. They thought Victor Oladipo was going to be that guy. He could be, but I think that's too much pressure on a guy who's coming off of two near career-ending injuries in Victor Oladipo. If and I'm just gonna spitball some stuff. If you're talking about Bam Adebayo, obviously, because you're right, he would be gone. If you're talking about Bam Adebayo and you're talking about um, Duncan Robinson would be on that as well because he's not worth the money that they paid him. You would still keep Kyle Lowry, I think, although I think you should move on. But if you don't, that's fine. Not the end of the world. You still have Kyle, you still got Jimmy. Now you add in KD, you still have Jimmy Butler, and you have Tyler Hero. I would assume if the Heat are going to add Bam in a trade, that third team would be the Pacers, so they could try to bring in Miles Turner, so they still have some type of size and some type of defensive something
I like that.
down low. But KD to the Heat means Jimmy can go back to being the number one guy. Kyle Lowry's on the floor, and when Kyle Lowry's on the floor, he can just facilitate, which means Jimmy Butler can go back to being the 22, 25 point a night guy only when he really needs to. Tyler Hero can stay as the spark plug off the bench. There's now no pressure on Victor Oladipo, which means he can go back to being a pretty good potential all-star caliber player. And most importantly, Kevin Durant is back in the situation similar, not the exact same, but similar to Golden State, where there is another guy he can rely on in crunch time that can either take the shot or take attention off of him so that he can take the shot. KD to the Heat makes the Heat a championship contender. I think KD to the Heat makes the Heat the second best team in the East. I would still give the nod to the Bucks, obviously. But aside from the Bucks, I don't think there would be a better team in the East outside of Milwaukee if KD goes to the Heat. And that's just me spitballing what a potential three-team trade would look like. Because if I know Pat Riley, and I think I do, because he's the godfather, Pat Riley, if he knows he has to move on from Bam, he's not moving on from Bam without getting a big to come back. He's not going to want to do that. Pat Riley's never been a proponent of small ball. That's never been Pat Riley's thing. So if Pat Riley's going to move on from Bam, he's going to get somebody back. The first guy that comes to mind, a guy that's always been kind of thrown up in trade talk, is Miles Turner. That's not a bad starting lineup either. You got Kyle Lowry, Victor Oladipo, Jimmy Butler, KD, and Miles Turner. That's a solid starting five. And I think that's a team that could once again be the number one seed and be a legitimate. It wouldn't be boring basketball, and they'd be a legitimate NBA champion in my estimation if that happens.
No, I like that. I think that they'll be top three, top. Yeah, I'm big on my Sixers, but
Of course.
they would be over. They would be over the Sixers unless James
What,
Harden just
what I don't want to
turns
see
around.
is KD to the Suns. That does not work. And the reason that doesn't work is because A, there's not going to be any DeAndre Ayton, who's going to be that reliable guy down low, number one. Number two, most importantly, you got Chris Paul, okay, cool. You have Devin Booker, okay, cool. You have KD, but there's not going to be any defense because their bench is their defense. You're going to have to send out Jay Crowder. You're going to have to send McCall Bridges, whether you want to or not. Like the guys that make up your defensive heart and soul, those guys are going to have to go for you to bring in KD. That would be a worse trade, I think, for the Suns, because while you're bringing in KD, you're sacrificing defense in a overpowered Western Conference offensively, where you have the Golden State Warriors who just won the chip. You have Luka Doncic and the Mavericks. You've got the Grizzlies. I don't know why, but for some reason we've forgotten that Jamal Murray and Michael Porter Jr. exist in
They're
Denver.
coming.
They're going to be scary. I'm not a fan of it, but the New Orleans Pelicans are bringing Zion back. That's going to be a scary trio with Zion, Brandon Ingram, and CJ McCollum. And just off topic, it's so crazy that just a couple of years ago, we were talking about how the age of the big three is over. And we're back 2 years later, and the big threes are back. You got a big three in Golden State again. The when healthy, the Lakers have got a big three. It looks like the Suns are looking for a big three, although they kind of had one, but they'll lose it without like the big
Yeah.
three. The age of the big three is starting to come back, and I don't know why we hate it on so much because we're talking about some of the most entertaining basketball ever. When you've got three guys on a team that you can really rely on, that makes for really good basketball.
Yeah, no, I like that. See, I think it's like two different types of big threes, right?
Mm-hmm.
You got the organic big threes. You got that with the Celtics. They had that with
Yeah,
Jason Tatum,
yeah.
Jalen Brown, Marcus Smart. In Miami, it was I guess you could put Tyler Hero in there, but they had Jimmy, they had Bam, they had Kyle Lowry, they had Tyler. That's kind of organic. They kind of traded for guys with the Lakers and the Nets. I think because it wasn't organic and because you have these three guys with max contracts,
Yeah,
and just everybody else on the bench is just like,
yeah.
on better minimum deals chasing for a ring. It's like if one guy gets injured, it's over. Like
Mm-hmm.
that's the problem with the Lakers.
Yeah.
If AD is injured, it's wraps. I don't care
Yep.
if Kyrie comes there, it's wraps. If AD is not healthy,
Mm-hmm.
with the Nets, when Kyrie went down, who they have, on the bench. I mean, they had a Patty Mills. They had. I mean, they didn't even have nobody really. They had Mike James playing for them last season. So it was like the big three is cool when you have three superstars, but if one of those superstars goes down with injury, you can't recover. With these organic led big threes, it's like, okay, even though Clay Thompson might not have it, even though he's in and out, and he might not have it some nights, y'all still got a guy in Andrew Wiggins. Y'all still got a guy in Jordan Poole who y'all drafted. And that's what separates the organic big threes from the player made big threes, because they can afford to have a superstar get injured and all that because they have a good bench, like you said. But I think with the feet with the Suns and the Heat, I think the conference matters because you have the Warriors.
Yeah.
You got the Grizzlies who are gonna be coming. You got the Nuggets who are gonna be coming. You got the Clippers who are gonna be
I
coming.
didn't
You
even
got a
mention the
bunch.
Clippers.
You
They got
got
a
a
big three now with
man.
Leonard and George. Yeah.
You got a bunch of teams. So I do think that the Suns are a deeper team, like currently constructed, than the Heat.
Mm-hmm.
I think and again, a guy like KD, you have to give them the farm. You gotta give the Nets the farm, and
And that's the thing too, is and you and I are on the same page about. I think we are about how lovely it is to see players feel empowered to like ask out, right?
mhm.
Here's the thing about that though. And this is another reason why I am not all up in arms about people that are upset with Kevin Durant asking out to trade. Kevin Durant has 4 years left on his contract. Kevin Durant is a player that you give up the farm for, but if you're one of these other teams in the NBA, are you willing to give up the farm for a guy that could potentially ask out with multiple years left on his contract? That is the one drawback to trading for Kevin Durant. Now, I believe, and I understand it, but I don't subscribe to it. I do think that if Kevin Durant gets traded to somewhere where he wants to be, where he thinks he can win, you don't have to worry about that.
Yeah,
He is not one of those guys where you have to worry about a situation where he's forcing out every year or every other year. That's not something you worry about with KD. What you worry about with Kevin Durant is health at this point. Because when he's healthy, he's giving you 30 a night.
wait, so
You're
if he
getting that.
goes to Toronto, you think he's playing with them? If they give up the farm, because now you got to think that's a roster wise, that's worse
I'll
than the
be
Nets.
honest. I'll be honest. I think so. I
Mm.
think as long as the Raptors can keep Fred VanVleet, obviously they're going to want to keep Scotty Barnes. I think he would want to play there because Toronto isn't a bad place to play. The one issue with going to Toronto, though, is the last superstar to get traded to Toronto won a chip.
Mm.
That's the one thing. And I think at this point for Kevin Durant, and I don't know if he's considering this, and I don't think he should. But again, we're talking about being spoiled and we're talking about the fans and the media, right? If you are Kevin Durant and you really want to silence the doubters, you got to go somewhere that needs it. You have to go somewhere that hasn't sniffed that greatness or hasn't experienced that greatness. You got to go somewhere that if you go, you will be appreciated no matter who else is on the team. So we're talking
Mm.
about either a young team or potentially, because we, for some reason, our generation likes to draw these nonsensical, insequential, non-sequential rather comparisons to LeBron James, a homecoming, like something either Kevin Durant's going back to OKC
Oh
or
man,
Kevin
that would be
Durant's going to
some.
a young team. That is what needs to happen. Kevin Durant needs to go somewhere, and he has a say in this. And if you're if you're actually go to a young team, it works in your favor. Kevin Durant needs to go to a young team that doesn't have too much chemistry, but has just enough where you can go be recognized as the guy and still rely on those young guys. So I'm not going to send them to a team like Cleveland because that could really mess it up because I like what they got going on in Cleveland.
You got that LeBron factor.
Of course,
Yeah,
if
yeah,
you're
that would be
and
good.
there's the LeBron factor, right? So you're going to, if I'm Kevin Durant, I'm gonna be honest, and this might sound crazy. I'm thinking about what it would be like potentially to go to Detroit, what it would maybe be like to go to Portland, maybe what it would be like to go to Charlotte, or what it would be like to go back home to OKC. Those are the four teams because all four of those teams, three of them, well, Charlotte's never won a chip, right?
Yeah,
It's been the Detroit hasn't won a chip since the 80s. Portland hasn't won a chip.
but they haven't been in the finals since Jordan. I
They
mean,
haven't been in the finals since Clyde, if they've even won one. And I think they've won one, but they haven't been in the finals since Clyde. And the Thunder haven't been good since they left Seattle. Those are your four options if you're Kevin Durant, because those are four places where you can go, and you can be you can hoop. And if I have to pick the best option, I'm looking at either Portland or I'm looking
I
at
love
Charlotte.
Portland. I
Those are the
love
two
Portland.
options.
I love Portland
And the
because
reason
like,
why is
keep on
because
going.
you've got Dame, you have Nurkic. You can go be that wing. You can go do that and you can be that wing. And they have Jeremy Grant, but I'm sure they'd probably have to give up Jeremy Grant if they're going to bring in Kevin Durant,
Yeah, it
right?
wouldn't make no
If you're talking
sense.
about OKC, that's where it gets a little bit dicey. But OKC has so many draft picks that they don't necessarily have to trade players on the roster. They can just trade a whole bunch of picks. Of course, you have to give up something. But as long as you can keep on the SGA, obviously you want to keep Chet. If you can keep Josh Giddey, bring in KD and trade a whole bunch of picks and some depth. We're talking like Trey Man and maybe Poku and some of those other talents. And
Yeah,
you can keep Giddey and SGA and Chet. That's a chef kiss. That's
that's
amazing.
that's
But
something right there.
if you're KD, because KD has a say in this, we don't obviously the Nets are going to say, oh, we're gonna send him whatever gets the best package. Yeah, that's what every team's supposed to say. KD has a say. KD should want to go to a young team. I think he should.
No,
He should absolutely want to go to a young team, a team
I
that
like that Portland thing.
doesn't have any real any real sense of any real sense of success lately that needs it, but they're young enough where they're going to respect you. And these are places where KD can attract. Maybe not the best, but people might want to go to Charlotte to play with KD. People might want to go to Portland to play with KD and Dame. People might
Yeah,
want to go to OKC potentially, right? There's options. These aren't the sexiest places, but there's places that you can go because it's not just Kevin. It's Kevin and someone else, whether it's a young guy or it's a bona fide star. If I had to
yeah,
pick though, I'd pick Portland because Portland's the best option, I think.
yeah. I love
Absolutely, it's
Portland.
the
I
best
love
option.
Portland because now it's not like going to a team and they missed the playoffs last season, so it's not like kind of problem I had with him in Phoenix and Miami. It's like these were two of the
These are the two
top
best teams in basketball last year.
two best teams of basketball. That's still like that you still like speaking to that narrative of like you just hopping on the bandwagon and all of that, which isn't true, isn't the same thing as obviously him going to Golden State versus him going to like Phoenix or Miami. But that narrative is still gonna go around. I think him going to Portland now it's like, they got swept by Golden State in the conference finals, right? They were never even close to them, even though it might have looked like that. They were never even close to Golden State. Even when KD got injured in the conference finals, prior to or the series prior to, and Steph and Clay waxed them, swept them guys, right? So I think for him to go to Portland and get a ring with Dame, that's the leader. And I think KD is looking to just hoop. He's looking to just hoop. He's not looking to lead nobody. He's not that leader. He's pretty much told us, or not told us, but shown us that he's a hooper. But in terms of leading people, that's not his forte. But in Portland, he can just hoop. And then if he wins, it's like, I done got Dame, who is never ever gonna sniff the finals or get a chip ever. I got him a ring too. That will look
Yep.
good for optics as well. Now, the last point with him in Miami, I do think that put him going to Miami. That's a lot of pressure on KD, because
Sure.
now it's like Bron, he went there, he got 2 rings. If you don't get a ring in Miami, now you're like, even that now you're gonna be compared to Bron even more, like you're not that guy and all this. So I think if he goes to Portland, and look, it's out the way, you can just hoop. It's not gonna be too much media over there, like how it is in New York, like how it is,
He's got to go somewhere
whatever.
where no one's ever been. Like he's got to go somewhere where no current superstar has been. So
and
Portland,
change and
okay,
change that
and yeah,
franchise around. So I'm I've been on KD, but it's only because I know the greatness in him, and I thought that he could be a leader.
yeah.
He's not, but let's see him hoop and try to get another ring. I want to get into start, bench, cut. We're gonna have a
Okay.
couple of little players. Let me pull this up. Uh, Let me know when you ready, and I'm gonna start with the first group of players. You ready?
Start bench cuts always get me in trouble. So let's do it.
Let's
Yeah.
get it. Let's get it. So start bench cut: Brandon Ingram, Jalen Brown, Jimmy Butler.
Are we just based on this season? Are we projecting? How are we doing this? We projecting
This
or
is based
just
like who you want coming in the next season. Who do you want on your team?
start Jimmy? Of course, that one's. I think he's clearly the best of the three. You have to bench Jalen and cut Brandon Ingram, but it's not because Brandon Ingram's bad. It's because Jalen Brown is a number 2 option on a championship winning team or potentially a championship winning team. And as
Yep.
much as I love Brandon Ingram, the one thing that he lacks that the other two don't is the defense. He can score with Jimmy and he can score with Jalen Brown, but Jimmy's a better defender and Jalen Brown is a slightly better defender. So start Jimmy, cut Jalen, or start Jimmy, bench Jalen, cut Brandon.
I'm the same way. Start Jimmy. He's got the offense. He's got the defense. He's that leader. He can be the best. I feel like if a team is really surrounded by Jimmy, he has a lot of pieces. He can be the best player on the championship team. He at least has the intangibles. Bench Jalen Brown. I'm right with you. And cut Bi. Now the reason why I said cut Bi and bench Jalen Brown is because I see JB have that dog in him. Like he's got that, like, like he's gonna go at you.
Yep.
I see with Brandon Ingram, he's gonna get you buckets,
Yep.
but is he gonna go at you every single night on on defense and on offense? I get that vibe from Jalen Brown. I don't get that vibe from Brandon
That's
Ingram.
fair.
Maybe we'll see next season. You got Zion with him, right? Now he's got CJ McCollum. So we'll see what he does. But in terms of that dog, that oomph, gotta go with JB.
Of course.
Now we're going our next one. We got start bench cut. Let me pull this up. Luka Doncic, Kevin Durant, Nikola Jokic. Who you got?
Start Luka, bench Kevin, cut Jokic. That's really
Ooh, this was quick.
that's so easy for me.
Ooh.
While I do think that KD is the best player in the world, I do think that Luka is younger and Luka's a more prolific scorer than KD is right now. Right now, he's more prolific scorer. You defenses have more problems with Luka than they do with KD. They're both very unique, and I would flip it either way. But with Luka, the one the one thing that puts it over the edge for me with Luka is because he's so young. KD, we already know how I feel about KD. Jokic, Jokic is a two-time reigning MVP, and that's all good and grand. But you can you can find someone to fill Nikola Jokic's shoes with the way that Denver plays basketball. I mean this wholeheartedly. With the way that Denver plays basketball, it might not be at the level of Jokic because he's averaging close to 30 and he's and but you can find someone. And I'll give you a perfect example. His name is maybe DeAndre Ayton or maybe Clint Capella. You
Mm.
could put either of those guys in Denver, they would average, I think, 20, 15, and 7. Jokic is averaging much more. He's averaging more assists than he is. He's averaging more assists than 7 assists because he's a passer. But Clint Capella and DeAndre Ayton are better defenders than Nikola Jokic. And it's not that Nikola Jokic is a bad defender, but I think we give Jokic too much credit defensively. It is
Oh yeah,
very hard,
he's not in their atmosphere. He's
right?
not in
It
their
is very
stratosphere.
hard to find someone as unique at the game of basketball as Luka Doncic. It's even harder to find someone as a leader of the game of basketball as Kevin Durant because we've never seen in the history of basketball a
6'11",
7 foot
30.
sharpshooter that could pull up from anywhere. Like anywhere. Steph Curry or Kevin Durant can hit a shot. I put Luka over KD because he's younger and because Luka still has room to improve defensively. I don't think Kevin Durant cares about improving defensively anymore. He can play defense when it really matters. But as far as like the full 48, like that dog you're talking about, I don't think KD has the I don't think he wants to. I don't think it matters to KD if he improves defensively at this point because of how old he is.
Yeah.
Luka's still in a position where he can still improve defensively. And we're talking about a guy who can shoot it from anywhere, who has handles, the ball's on a string. He's got a great IQ. He can pass the ball. You add defense to that. That's a nasty, nasty, nasty basketball player. Luka, KD, Jokic.
Here, I'll go. I like your picks. I like your picks. I'll go start Luca, bench Jokic, cut KD. People gonna be like, I'm gonna have this on TikTok. People are like, yo, cut KD. How could you do that? Look, hear me out. I'm starting Luca because he has done the most with less in his
Mm-hmm.
career.
Sure.
Jokic, he hadn't had Jamal Murray, hasn't had Michael Porter Jr. He's still leading his team to the playoffs. Now, KD, unlike these guys, he's been injured. He hasn't been as healthy. If we talk about availability, talking about, I think, just from an A2 games into the playoffs, I'm going to get more out of Luca and out of Jokic than I will with Kevin Durant.
Mm-hmm.
And at the end of the day, I think Luca and Jokic would love to be in KD's shoes. KD got Simmons. KD got Kyrie. KD has Steph Curry, Patty Mills, Nick Claxton. That's a championship level team. Luka Doncic's second best player was Jalen Brunson, who everybody was saying was overpaid. I bet he would love to have a roster like Kevin Durant. Nikola Jokic, Jamal Murray was out. Michael Porter Jr. was out. His second best player was Aaron Gordon for most of the year. I bet he would die to be in that situation in Brooklyn. So that's why I have the edge with giving Luka and Jokic over KD. But not saying people don't know it's not all the time. I think people will get a little mixed up with KD all time versus me picking Luka and Jokic over him right now. Like you said, like you said earlier, KD he's got some injury history, and past few seasons he hasn't been healthy since Golden State, right? So I think health has played a factor, but those two guys that I would have over KD. Now we're gonna get into our last start bench cut. Lonzo Ball. Jalen Brunson, De'Aaron Fox. Start bench cut.
Lonzo. I'd start Lonzo.
Woo!
Start Lonzo. Bench Jalen Brunson. Cut De'Aaron Fox.
I gotta hear this. Why cut De'Aaron Fox?
Um. So I'd start Lonzo really because Lonzo's IQ is insane. Lonzo is one of the best defenders at the guard position in the league. And when he's healthy, he's a lock for at his best, and when he's healthy, he's a lock for 12 assists a night. Just on an average night, he'd give you around 8. But I think at his best, if Lonzo played his best all 82, he'd give you, or however many games he plays, he'd give you 12 assists a night.
Mm.
I'd bench Jalen Brunson because there aren't many players in the league that can get their own shot. And Jalen Brunson's not the best at it, but he can get his own shot. And we saw that in the series this
Can
past
De'Aaron
season.
Fox not get his own shot?
Darren Fox can get his own shot, but Jalen Brunson has thrived at being a reliable number 2 that, when necessary, can step up and fill the void of the number 1, right? It's the same reason why we love Jaylen Brown, because Jaylen Brown is a very reliable number 2, but when he has to, he can be the number 1. De'Aaron Fox is a victim of his own situation. Unfortunately, he was drafted by the Sacramento Kings, which is a dumpster organization. De'Aaron Fox is spectacular. He is a phenomenal player. And it's not that De'Aaron Fox is bad, or that I particularly think that Jalen Brunson is better than De'Aaron Fox. It's just De'Aaron Fox has to do so much in Sacramento that it is hard to me anyway, from my perception. It is hard to pinpoint specifically the one thing that De'Aaron Fox does that would separate your team from the rest if you had him. You know what I mean? There are things that Lonzo Ball does that separates him from the pack. He's a very good facilitator and he's a good defender. There are good facilitators in the NBA. There are good defenders in the NBA. There are not many players in the NBA that are both. Jimmy Butler, Ben Simmons would be the only 2 that come to mind off the top of my head that are both really good defenders and really good facilitators. And when I say really good, I mean all NBA caliber. Yeah.
Let me ask you this. Put De'Aaron Fox on the Bulls. Swap him out with Lonzo Ball. Do you think the Bulls go farther?
No. That's not a De'Aaron Fox thing. That's just, I don't think the Bulls. I think the Bulls are still a first round exit. They're still a lot away. Like, they're still missing a lot of depth. So that's not. This is De'Aaron Fox right now, and I mean this. If De'Aaron Fox, because I think what De'Aaron Fox is missing is a reliable number 2 in his backcourt. Like, if you put De'Aaron Fox in Charlotte, that's a playoff team. If you put De'Aaron Fox, I think if you put De'Aaron Fox in New Orleans and you put CJ McCollum back at the 2 where he belongs, that's a second round basketball team. Because they've got depth and they have a lot more pieces. Yeah. Right? The Bulls, they've got DeMar and they have Zach LaVine, and that's cool. Outside of that, though, there's not much in Chicago. And I know they've got Vooch, but Vooch is unreliable. He's a good basketball player, but he's not reliable. He's not reliable. So the only reason why I'm cutting De'Aaron Fox, it really has nothing to do with De'Aaron Fox and everything to do with just because of the situation he's in. He's asked to do a lot more outside of his skill set, and I think that has unfortunately diminished his abilities just a little bit, to the point where it's not that he's a bad player. He is still one of the better young players in basketball, but because he's asked to do so much outside of his skill set that I don't think he was really ready for, it's kind of caused him to take a step back in Sacramento. Like, if he was in a position where he could just be him and be that guy that pushes the pace, like what John Wall was in Washington, which is what we all compared him to when he was drafted. If he could be in a situation like that, where he's got a reliable number 2 in his backcourt, he's got a big man that he can rely on down low, and he can just kind of push the pace and facilitate and just be that guy in the clutch, I would absolutely take De'Aaron Fox over both of them. 100%. He's been asked to do a little bit too much, and that's been to his detriment. And when you ask a young player to do too much too soon, it puts a cap on how great they can be.
Mm.
That's the only reason why I'd cut De'Aaron Fox, is because of his situation and how it he could be so much better. I think he's just in a terrible position right now.
No, facts. I think the fact that he is a victim of his situation that propels him to be the best out of this group, in my opinion. So I'm gonna give you mine. I'm gonna
That's fair.
say start De'Aaron Fox,
Mm-hmm.
bench Jalen Brunson, cut Lonzo Ball. So it's basically like the complete opposite. So I'm starting De'Aaron Fox because I think if you put him, and Richard Jefferson said this best, we gotta start blaming a lot of these teams for being just terrible organizations, being
Yeah,
terrible at player development.
yeah.
De'Aaron Fox, if you put him in any competent organization, he's gonna be an all. Like he would have already been an all star by now. Like
Oh, of course. I agree with you. I agree with you.
if he was in the East, he's gonna be an all star. Depending on which team he would be on in the West, he'd be an all star as well. But it is a tougher conference, guard wise, especially too. But I think change his scenery. If he's not at that with the bum Kings, he's gonna be an all star in this league. So that's why I have him starting. And another thing with Darren Fox, I he can be that go-to guy for a team. I can't trust Lonzo to be that go-to guy for a team. And that's what a lot of teams they don't have like a go-to guy. They got some guys that can facilitate. You can get a guy that can give you 6 assists, give you 7 assists, right? There's some role players that can do that and give you some rebounds too. But again, creating their own shot for like too many nights. Lonzo, he might have 15 points. Next night he has 7 points. I'm like, come on, where's the consistency at? Now, if his points were as consistent as his assists and rebounds, oh, now we're working with some. But if De'Aaron Fox started, I got Jalen Brunson on the bench. Similarly to De'Aaron Fox, I trust Jalen Brunson down the stretch more than I trust Lonzo Ball. So when we talk about just having it every single night, some nights Lonzo has it. Other nights, he's not all the way in. He's not, he can not now look. He can do more things on the court than both those guys can do. But at what they do, De'Aaron Fox, Jalen Brunson, I feel like they do what I feel like in terms of getting their own shot, in terms of being that go-to guy, especially when Jalen Brunson didn't have Luca. I mean, he was cooking,
Yeah,
cooking.
yeah.
So I think just being that go-to guy, that's what puts them over the top. But I want to see because if Lonzo could be so great because he has because he's good at the things that you can't teach. You can't teach good IQ. I mean, you're born with it. You can't teach being a great passer. You can't teach just having an eye for, getting rebounds. You can teach on somebody. You can teach somebody to have a good shot. You can teach somebody to get a bad to get some, to create their own shot. If he creates his own shot, or he'll end up being a top 10 point guard in this league. But he got to have it every night, and that's what he's missing. But man, it's been a pleasure to have you on the podcast. I didn't expect it to be this long, but it was just a pleasure, man. I
I
know
talked too
that.
much. That's my bad.
No, you all good. You all good. I mean, it's definitely been a pleasure. I know you just got off work, or you're coming back from that DC traffic and all that. Came right back to the computer to hop on this episode. But man, thank you for hopping on.
I appreciate you for having me on. It's been a minute. So I'm. It's always a pleasure to talk hoops with you, man. I'm glad to be back on the show.
Definitely, definitely. And later on in the future, once NFL creeps back up, be my guy to hop on, talk some Eagles, talk, you a Washington fan?
No Packers fan.
Oh, you definitely are a Packers fan. Oh, we definitely got to talk about that too. Definitely talk. So tune in. So for y'all listening, tune in for that. Got some stuff lined up for y'all soon. But again, this is Real Talk with Miles Johnson, where y'all know I always keep it real. I'm out, y'all.